Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Michelle Brickley, and I'm Associate Director at the Office on Violence Against Women. Typically, this presentation would be done by the grant program specialist who oversees this program. Her name is Tanette Gassa, and unfortunately, she was unable to be with us today, and so I am actually filling in for her. I want to welcome each of you to today's pre-application conference call, and we are going to just move our way through the presentation, and then at the end, we'll open up for Q&A, as DMR already mentioned. So please jot down your questions, and we'll be sure to respond to them at the end of the presentation, once I present the slides. All right, so this is just a slide that presents some very high-level information about solicitation close date, the grants.gov number that you will find when searching for the solicitation in grants.gov, the program CFDA number, which is 16023. The primary focus of this program is, of course, sexual assault and direct services for survivors of sexual assault. The award period is for 36 months, and typically awards are made up to $300,000. And then just a note, if you have not already done so, please make sure that you are registered in both SAM and the grants.gov systems. Please do that before April the 5th. I'll talk a little bit more about the process for application and submission, but right now your priority should be to make sure that you are registered in SAM and in grants.gov. Just a quick overview about the Office on Violence Against Women. As part of the Department of Justice, OVW was created in 1995, and we administer grant programs authorized by the Violence Against Women Act and subsequent legislation. We provide national leadership on issues of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. And OVW grants support coordinated community response to hold offenders accountable and serve victims or survivors. And I'll just add, many of you that are following the Violence Against Women Act, you will know that the act was just reauthorized for fiscal year VAWA 2022, which will go for an additional 5 years. And so we are excited that we were able to, after the authorization lapsed in 2018, the previous authorization was VAWA 2013, lasted for 5 years, lapsed in 2018. But the good thing about this, as long as Congress appropriates money, we can still operate. And so although VAWA had not been reauthorized, we were still able to make awards from fiscal year 2018 until fiscal year 2021, because Congress still appropriated funding for grants to be made. But we are certainly excited that VAWA 2022 was just recently authorized. A little bit about the Sexual Assault Culturally Specific Program. So this program, just a little background knowledge. So this program is actually one of 5 programs that fall under the Sexual Assault Services Program. So there's a big umbrella program titled Sexual Assault Services Program. There are 5 programs under that umbrella. This program is one. There's another program that is a formula program, and those funds are administered to states and territories, and then those states and territories in turn release solicitations and administer that funding at that level. There's also a state and territory coalitions, sexual assault coalitions program that falls under the larger umbrella. That money is, of course, administered by the coalitions, both tribal, state, and territory sexual assault coalitions. There is a sister program to this program. It is the Tribal Sexual Assault Services Program, and it is for tribal organizations, limited to tribal organizations as the applicants, falls under the umbrella as well. And then this program as well. So the Sexual Assault Culturally Specific Program supports nonprofit organizations that primarily focus on culturally specific communities and have expertise in the area of sexual assault, or the organization can partner with another organization that has such expertise. The goal of the Sexual Assault Culturally Specific Program is to establish, maintain, expand sustainable, culturally appropriate services that address the unique needs and challenges of victims of sexual assault from culturally specific communities. So under that larger umbrella, the real premise behind the sexual assault service program was to have multiple funding streams to directly impact and provide direct services to sexual assault survivors. The first round of funding under that large umbrella for all of these programs was administered back in 2009, and that includes the first round of funding for this sexual assault culturally specific services program. So here's the definition of culturally specific services, and all of this is, of course, statutorily defined. Culturally specific services means community-based services that include culturally relevant and linguistically specific services and resources to culturally specific communities. Culturally specific means primarily directed toward racial and ethnic minority groups. And those groups are American Indians, including Alaska Natives, Eskimos and Aleuts, Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians and other Pacific Islanders, Blacks, and Hispanics. So culturally specific means these racial and ethnic minority groups have to be the focus of the organizations that apply for this particular funding stream. So the purpose area, there's really only one purpose area for the sexual assault culturally specific services program, and funds under this program must be used to support the establishment, maintenance, and expansion of culturally specific intervention and related assistance for victims of sexual assault. Such intervention and related assistance may include a 24-hour hotline to provide intervention services or make referrals, do accompaniment and advocacy through medical, criminal justice, and social support systems, including medical facilities, police, and court proceedings, do crisis intervention, short-term individual and group support services, and comprehensive service coordination and supervision to assist sexual assault victims and family or household members. Information and referral to assist the sexual assault victim and family or household members. So those are just some examples of what is meant by intervention and related assistance for this program. Some additional examples: community-based culturally specific services and support mechanisms, including outreach activities for underserved communities, develop and distribution of materials on issues related to the services described above. Culturally specific services means community-based services that include, again, culturally relevant and linguistically specific services and resources to culturally specific communities. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into the eligibility section of the presentation. So if some of you on the participating in today's call are familiar with OVW, typically we also, in addition to the statutorily defined programs purpose areas, there's also OVW priority areas, and they are typically set by the director of the office. And currently our acting director is Allison Randall. And these are the priority areas for fiscal year 2022 for this particular program. The first one is advance racial equity as an essential component of ending sexual assault, to strengthen efforts to prevent or end sexual assault, including improved outreach services and support for survivors of sexual assault, improve outreach services and support for survivors of sexual assault from underserved communities, particularly LGBTQ communities. The priority areas. The priority areas are optional. So the purpose area of the program, you have to address the purpose area of the program, but the priority areas are optional. And that information will be weighed during the review of the application. So priority areas give you additional consideration, but again, those areas are optional. If you had an opportunity to take a look at the solicitation for this program, there are some activities that compromise victim safety and recovery, or undermine offender accountability. And we do not fund these activities because they jeopardize victim safety, deter or prevent physical or emotional healing for victims, or allow offenders to escape responsibility for their actions. Any applications that propose any such activities may receive a deduction in points during the review process or may be eliminated from consideration altogether. Information on activities that compromise victim safety and recovery may be found in the solicitation companion guide. The activities listed below are out of scope for the program and will not be supported by the program's funding stream. Applications that propose activities deemed to be substantially out of scope may receive a deduction in points during the review process or may be eliminated from consideration. So some things that that are out of scope for this program are research projects, activities focused on prevention efforts in public education, like bystander intervention, social norms campaigns, presentations on healthy families, any criminal justice related projects, including law enforcement, prosecution, courts, or forensic interviews. These are things that are out of scope for this program. Just keep in mind that this program is for direct services and intervention for survivors of sexual assault. Some additional out of scope activities, using funding for sexual assault forensic medical examiner programs, supporting sexual assault response team coordination, providing training to allied professionals in the community, i.e. law enforcement, child protection services, prosecution, and other community-based organizations. So again, if you're familiar with OVW funding stream, typically that providing training to allied professionals under most programs, that is an acceptable activity, but under this program, it is not. The only training that can be done is the training of the advocates that will be providing direct services under this program. So no training for prosecutors on how to prosecute cases. That's not this program. Again, it's for direct intervention services. The Sexual Assault Services Program, culturally specific program, is an extremely small program. This gives you an idea. Typically, we make about 14 awards per year. The award period of performance start date will be the start of the fiscal year 2023. So the start date for the awards would be 10/1/2022, the beginning of the fiscal year 2023 year. Anticipated total amount to be awarded under this solicitation is about $3,750,000. Anticipated maximum dollar amount of awards is $300,000. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the period of performance is 36 months for projects funded under this program. Just a little background information. In addition to the Violence Against Women Act being reauthorized, it was reauthorized as part of the fiscal year 2022 omnibus budget. And so when the solicitation was originally released, we used numbers from fiscal year 2021, but now that we actually have a budget, we know that there was an increase for the larger sexual assault services program, the big umbrella program. It went from being I made my note. It was last year, it was authorized. We had about $41 million for the larger program in the 5 different funding streams. This year, the authorization has been increased by $13 million. So for fiscal year 2022, SAS has $54 million. And so this program, the Sexual Assault Services Program, gets 10% of the authorization, which gives this program about $5.4 million. So a little uptick than was available last year. And the 5.4 will not be the total amount that is available for grants, because there are some other things that have to come off that amount, like our salaries. So we don't get any additional money for our salaries. It all comes off of the programs. But I say all that to say there will be more awards made, maybe somewhere around 18, 19, 20, give or take, just due to the uptick in the fiscal year 2022 omnibus budget being passed and the larger program receiving an increase. All right, so the types of applications. So you are considered a new applicant if you have never received funding under this program, or if you had previous funding under this program, but it lapsed or it expired on or before May 3rd, 2021. You are considered a continuation applicant. That means you have an existing or recently closed, meaning it closed after May 3rd, 2021, award under this program. And just keep in mind, as much as we would love to promise continuation funding, we are not able to do that. So continuation funding is not guaranteed. So if you're familiar with this program, this is an area where we're doing something just a little bit differently. So I talked a little bit about the statutory purpose of this program. And so there is a recognition that there are programs that meet the eligibility definition of culturally specific services, but they have not been in a position to be able to provide direct services to survivors. And so this year we have included an opportunity for applicants to apply, if they so choose, for what we are titling planning grants. And so planning grants under this program will be made for up to $100,000 for a period of 24 months. And so you already see the difference between a planning grant and if you came in for a grant that you're positioned to fully implement. So the funding for the planning grants, funds must be used to establish culturally specific sexual assault services. And we have listed some of the activities that the planning grantees would be focused on during that 24-month period. So applicants or those that submit applications for planning grants and they're ultimately chosen, they will participate in site visits with other culturally specific services programs that are implementing sexual assault services. They may do peer-to-peer exchange with some of those organizations. There will be a lot of technical assistance provided to any of the planning grantees. They will use the 24 months to develop relevant policies and procedures regarding service provision for sexual assault survivors, delivering culturally specific sexual assault training to existing staff and leadership, funding a project or planning coordinator. So somebody that is going to be able to, spearhead all of this as part of the planning grant, creating or revising program documents that really speak to the needs of sexual assault, survivors. It may be revising intake forms and so forth, coordinating and conducting planning meetings, and establishing an advisory or consulting committee. Applicants applying for a planning grant are required to set aside $15,000 of their total budget for OVW training and technical assistance. These funds will be used during the period of performance of the grant project. And this is just a little note. If you are an organization that applies for a planning grant and you're ultimately selected as a planning grantee, when you finish the 24 months of kind of positioning your organization to be able to respond and provide services in a culturally specific way to sexual assault survivors, you may be eligible for a full non-competitive award upon completion of the planning activities. Any future supplemental awards will be based on factors, including but not limited to OVW's available appropriation and then the grantee's performance as a planning grantee. So it's basically, we're saying, if you complete the planning process and we feel like you adhere to the program, carried out the performance of the planning grantee activities, that you may be eligible for a full 3-year, 36-month at $300,000 to be able to implement a full project for providing culturally specific sexual assault services. This is some additional information about who's eligible and who's not eligible for the fiscal year 2022 Sexual Assault Services Program recipients. So if you received a fiscal year 2020 or fiscal year 2021 under this program, you are not eligible to apply as the lead applicant or a partner or subrecipient for the fiscal 2022 proposal. Likewise, an organization that is a partner or subrecipient on a fiscal year 20 or fiscal year 2021 award is not eligible to apply as the lead applicant or a partner or subrecipient on the fiscal year 2022 proposal. So I mentioned earlier that this is a very small program, and so we certainly, have to be mindful that you can't be a lead and then come in the following year as a partner, because then that is certainly dwindling down the resources that would be available to support other programming across the country. Just a note on this slide, if you are a current grantee with a substantial amount of funding unobligated, meaning you have 50% or more remaining on your current award, and that is as of the end of this month, without adequate justification, you may not be considered for funding or may receive a reduced award amount if selected for funding in fiscal year 2022. So basically what that means, if you have a current award and you are still planning to apply, because this is my year to apply, but when we go through our processes and we see that you have more than 50% of your money remaining on that current award, we may remove your application for fiscal year 2022 from consideration if there is not adequate justification about why that money is still remaining, or we may still award you in fiscal year 2020, award you in fiscal year 2022, but at a reduced amount. So we will be taking into consideration, hey, your organization still has X dollars available under that current award, and so we will award you in fiscal year 2022, but at a reduced amount. So some mandatory requirements for recipients under this program. As I mentioned before, you are required to participate in OVW sponsored training and technical assistance. We call that TTNA. And I actually, I like to refer to training and technical assistance as a gift to OVW grantees. So we don't just fund you under this program and say, okay, congratulations on your funding, and send you off on your merry way to implement your projects. In addition to the funding for your program, we also have a national technical assistance provider, the Sexual Assault Sisters of Color Ending Sexual Assault Service, national nonprofit organization that is the TA provider for grantees funded under this program. And so that is an additional gift to ensure that you have adequate technical assistance and are able to implement your program in a successful way. And so I like to think of that as a bonus, as an added gift for OVW grantees. Mandatory requirements: OVW may conduct a program assessment or evaluation necessitating grantee involvement. Therefore, recipients may be expected to dedicate some OVW funded time and resources to participating in an assessment or evaluation. Number 3, the provision of sexual assault services to non-intimate partner sexual assault victims. Applications proposing projects to serve only victims of intimate partner sexual assault will be removed from further funding consideration. So what does that mean? This is the program where you can address sexual assault across the continuum. So it could be child sexual abuse to adult. It does not have to be within the context of domestic violence or stalking. It can be outright sexual assault intervention. And so if you propose a project where the work is within the frame of intimate partner violence only, you will be removed from consideration, because the purpose of this program is to address sexual assault, sexual violence across the continuum, and not just within the realm of intimate partner violence. So that is, if you don't remember, it's a lot of information I'm presenting on, but if you don't remember anything, please remember bullet number 3. This is where you can propose projects that reach across the spectrum. Keep in mind, I talked a little bit about planning grantees. If you are selected for a planning grant for that 24-month period for up to $100,000, you will not, during that 24-month period, be providing direct services to sexual assault victims and or survivors. You will be basically using that 24 months to position the organization to be able to provide adequate services. So just keep that in mind. All right, eligibility information. So who's eligible to apply? Number 1, private, nonprofit tribal organizations for which the primary purpose of the organization as a whole is to provide culturally specific services to American Indians, including Alaska Natives, Eskimos, Aleuts, Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and other Pacific Islanders, Blacks or Hispanics in the United States or U.S. territories, Native American tribal organizations other than federally recognized tribal governments, and nonprofits having a 501c3 status with the IRS other than institutions of higher education. So those are the groups that are eligible to apply. Here's some additional requirements for applicants for this program. Must have documented organizational experience in the area of sexual assault intervention, or have entered into a formal partnership with an organization having such expertise, have expertise in the development of community-based, linguistically and culturally specific outreach and intervention services relevant for the specific communities to which assistance will be provided, or have the capacity to link to existing services in the community tailored to the needs of culturally specific populations, have an advisory board or steering committee and staffing, which is reflective of the culturally specific community. Just a note, if the culturally specific program is one division within a larger organization with other areas of substantive work, for example, a division within a domestic violence organization focusing on Black, Hispanic, Latino victims, the organization is not eligible. So keep in mind that this program is for organizations that are rooted and grounded in their community, that are implementing strategies that meet the cultural needs of the groups that I have mentioned multiple times. And so that is why this program was statutorily approved, was to get the money in the hands of culturally specific organizations. It is not to get the money into the hands of organizations that are a subset focused on these groups. And also another takeaway is sometimes we see organizations that apply and they say they believe they are eligible by the mere fact of where they are located. So I am located in, the Bronx, and we serve a lot of Hispanic survivors of sexual assault. Therefore, we are culturally specific. That is not the case, and that organization is not eligible. Again, it's about the mission. It is about the organization being culturally relevant. It is about for them, by them. So please keep that in mind. Now, there is some space in the program for what we consider or say mainstream organizations who may be partners on these applications, but I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. So just keep that in mind regarding who's eligible for these funds. To ensure that projects supported by the Sexual Assault Services Culturally Specific Program, funds are implemented by eligible organizations with the required expertise. Applicants must document their expertise and or the expertise of their project partners. They must submit an MOE or Memorandum of Understanding, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. All right, so this will get into some of the partnerships that I just spoke of briefly. So all of this goes to eligibility. So category 1, your organization, those that fall into category 1, the applicant meets 2 things. The applicant is a culturally specific organization, and the applicant has a demonstrated history of providing sexual assault services beyond intimate partner sexual assault, and they have this expertise for at least a minimum of 3 years. There's no required partnership. You don't have to partner with another organization because you meet both criteria, culturally specific, and you have the sexual assault victim services beyond intimate partner sexual assault. You have both pieces. Category 2, the applicant is a culturally specific organization and will be partnering with another culturally specific organization that would otherwise be eligible to apply independently under this program, and either the applicant or its partner has a demonstrated history of providing sexual assault victim services, again, beyond intimate partner sexual assault for a minimum of 3 years. So sometimes this category is for applicants that come in. We see applications that come in from 2 eligible organizations. They meet both. They're culturally specific, they have the years, but they want to implement a project that is focusing on 2 different groups. So they want to implement a project that's focusing on Blacks and Hispanics, and each one of them bring the expertise that is needed to the table, and they just decided to partner, together, and they're gonna split the funds or however they plan to do it. That is totally acceptable. Those applicants fall into category number 2, and we also there's no cap on the compensation. Category number 3, the applicant is a culturally specific organization with less than 3 years of experience providing sexual assault victim services beyond intimate partner sexual assault. The applicant will be partnering with an organization with a demonstrated history of providing sexual assault victim services that is not otherwise eligible to apply independently for this program. In such a case, the partner compensation is limited to $30,000 for the 3-year award period. The partner must use these funds to provide technical assistance on sexual assault and related victim services to the applicant. So category 3 is basically, I talked a little bit previously about mainstream organizations. So for category 3, the applicant organization is culturally specific, so they meet that, but they do not have the required number of years of providing sexual assault victim services. So they partner with an organization that has that expertise. And the whole idea is that over the 36 months, the partner organization will be providing training and technical assistance to the applicant about providing direct sexual assault victim services. And so we have limited the compensation for the partner organization because that funding is solely for training of the culturally specific organization. So it's basically like we want the transfer of knowledge around providing direct services for sexual assault survivors to come from the mainstream organization with the hopes that one day, maybe the next time the culturally specific organization applies, that organization has been in a position to be trained and they can now on their own provide the direct services to sexual assault victims. So that is category number 3. So what I just mentioned, of course, is a mouthful. So this chart kind of sums things up a little bit more. Category 1 meets both things: culturally specific, minimum years of 3 years providing victim services, no partner required. Category 2, minimum of 3 years held by the applicant or partner. It's 2 culture specific organizations, no cap on partner compensation. Category 3, applicant is culturally specific, and you'll see the trend for all under that first column. You have to be culturally specific in order to apply for these funds. Category 3, they partner with an organization that does have the 3 years minimum. And because the partner is a non-culturally specific organization, we have capped the compensation for that partner. And just a note again about for planning grants, funds will be used to support the establishment of culturally specific sexual assault services. Applicants must partner with an organization that has a minimum of 3 years experience providing sexual assault services. So an MOU would be required. So remember, those that are interested in applying for a planning grant, your organization would not have the minimum 3 years sexual assault victim services experience. So you would have to partner with an organization that has that expertise, and you would submit an MOU to detail the partnership for the project. This is just a note: OVW will consider only 1 application per organization for the same service area. In addition, if an applicant submits multiple versions of the same application, OVW will review only the most recent system validated version submitted before the deadline. All right, so we're going to move into application and submission information. The complete application package, the solicitation included links to the required forms, is available on grants.gov and on the OVW website. So just basically saying the solicitation for this program is located in 2 places, grants.gov and the website. Applicants wishing to request a paper copy of these materials can contact the office, or they can send a message to the OVW SASP cultural mailbox. Applicants are strongly encouraged to submit a non-binding letter of intent to the SASP cultural mailbox by April the 5th. Again, it's non-binding, meaning if you submit it and you decide not to apply, that's fine. Or if you don't submit the letter of intent and you decide to apply, that's fine as well. But it's always a good idea to go ahead and submit the letter of intent, because it gives us information that helps us in the planning process moving forward once the solicitation closes. Interested applicants who do not submit a letter of intent are still eligible to apply. I just mentioned that. And then for more information, see the application and submission information section of the solicitation. So if you haven't had an opportunity to take a look at the solicitation for this program, all throughout the solicitation is information on who to contact for what. So for technical assistance with grants.gov, you want to contact the grants.gov applicant support, and there's a 1-800 number, or support@grants.gov. And for technical assistance with Just Grants, for those who may who are not familiar, all DOJ grant making components switched to a new grants management system. We used to use GMS, the grants management system, but now we are using a system called Just Grants. That is, of course, for application receipt and for management of grants should you be selected for funding, and it is also used internally by OVW staff for administration of the grants that are funded by our office. So there's a number for the Just Grants support, a number and an email address. I would just say to just keep this information handy. All right, application contents, proposal narrative, your budget detail worksheet, and the corresponding narrative for the budget. And then the memorandum of understanding or the memorandum of exemption, signed and currently dated. And so when we say currently dated, we want to see a date, of course, signed by the relevant authorized representatives during the planning and planning to submit an application for this year's sexual assault culturally specific program. So we gave a date of your signed, currently dated means on or after January 1st, 2022. So just keep that in mind. This just gives you information about we will ask, the application does ask for a proposal abstract. It's a short summary, no more than 2 pages, double space. It talks about the goal and intended outcome, the primary activities for which funds are requested, who will benefit, and the products and deliverables of your proposed project. And the proposal abstract will actually be entered into the Just Grants text box in the Just Grants system, but it will not be scored, but it is used throughout the review process. So it's very important that you, although it's not scored, that you still enter in your proposal abstract into that Just Grants text box. Data requested with application, also known as the DRA. In Just Grants, when you go to complete your application, there will be 2 surveys that must be completed. One is the pre-award risk assessment. That really has to do with some financial questions that you'll need to answer as an applicant. And then there's the Sexual Assault Services culturally specific data requested with application survey. So you'll need to complete both of those surveys in order to successfully submit your application in Just Grants. A list of the questions included in each survey appears at the end of the solicitation under the heading Survey Questions. Applicants should click on a survey name to access and complete the survey. All right, so this is information about your proposal narrative, some guidelines on the technical aspects, so 20 pages, double space. Your proposal narrative must address 3 things: the purpose of the proposal, what will be done, who will implement the proposal. The total points associated with the proposal narrative is 60 points. So out of 100 points, your proposal narrative weighs the most. So keep that in mind when responding to those 3 parts that make up the proposal narrative. Again, you will be referring to the solicitation for more guidance on what is asked in each one of those 3 parts so that you can respond appropriately in your proposal narrative. Budget worksheet and budget narrative. And you will be completing this via a web-based budget form in Just Grants. Keep in mind that your budget should be supportive of what was talked about in the proposal narrative. So display a clear link between the specific project activities and the proposed budget item. Make sure your budget includes the set aside money to attend OVW sponsored training and technical assistance in the amount of $10,000. And if you are from territory or Hawaii and Alaska, you want to set aside $12,000, a little bit more money to be able to access the training and technical assistance. And yes, we are still asking that you set this funding aside, recognizing we realize that we are still, not doing as much travel due to the COVID, due to the pandemic, but things are opening up. And so that money that is being set aside is for the life of the project, so for the full 36 months. And we are hopeful that travel will resume real soon. Budgets must reflect 36 months of project activity. The budget worksheet and budget narrative are worth a total of 20 points. So although your budget has to be tied to the project activities and project narrative, you also have to include budget narrative for the line items that you include in your budget. So be mindful of that as well. So you don't just include a line item and then there's no explanation for that line item, or there's no explanation for the position that you've included in the budget. You want to make sure that there's narrative to support the line items that you have included in your web-based Just Grants budget. For additional information, please see the budget worksheet and budget narrative section of the solicitation. All right, these are just some costs that are unallowable and must not be included in your budgets. So we cannot support lobbying, fundraising, purchase of real property, physical modification to buildings, including minor renovations such as painting or carpeting, construction. So don't include those things in your budget. And this is just a note about food and beverages. Generally, food and beverage costs are not allowable. Recipients must receive prior approval to use grant funds to provide a working meal or refreshments at a meeting, conference, training, or other event. And I would say typically, if it is, if you are requesting food for like staff to have a working meeting, or most likely that won't be approved. But if there is something that you are requesting, light refreshments for survivors during their like support groups, or anything that's connected to survivors, in all likelihood that will be approved. But again, you have to have prior approval for those costs. We talked a little bit about the Memorandum of Understanding, also known as the MOU, and then the Memorandum of Exemption, known as the MOE. These documents, one or the other, not both, will be uploaded as an attachment in Just Grants. The MOU is a document containing the terms of the partnership and the roles and responsibilities between two or more parties. The MOU must be a single document and be currently signed and dated. We talked about that, by the authorized representative of each proposed partner organization during the development of the application. Category 1 applicants must submit an MOE, that's a Memorandum of Exemption, and you're basically saying to us, we don't have to partner because we're a culturally specific organization and we have the minimum of 3 years providing sexual assault services. The total point value for the MOU or the MOE is 20 points. MOUs missing signatures may result in point deductions or removal from consideration. And I will also add outdated MOUs or not currently dated MOUs or MOEs, they both need to have dates. You can be removed from consideration. So something as minor as that, you want to pay close attention to, because it will determine how far your application moves in the process. All right, how to apply. So there's a 2-part process. Applications must be submitted electronically via grants.gov and Just Grants. Applicants that are unable to submit electronically must follow the instructions under OVW policy on late submissions. And it just gives you some information. See submission dates, times below for a list of steps for registering with all required systems and deadlines for completing each step. To submit an application, all applicants must register. So I talked a little bit about this earlier. Must register with SAM and grants.gov to ensure sufficient time to complete the registration process. Applicants must register online with SAM and with grants.gov immediately but no later than April the 5th. Now, all this information is in the solicitation, but we are highlighting it because this two-part authentication process for application submission is extremely important, because if you miss the grants.gov deadline, you will not be able to submit an application for the Just Grants deadline. So this talks about that two-step process. Applications for this program will be submitted through a two-step process. Submission of the SF424 and the SFLLL in grants.gov. So the only thing that you will be doing in grants.gov is submitting these two forms that will meet the requirement of your application submission in grants.gov. What that does is allows you to then be able to submit your full application in the Just Grants system. So full application meaning uploading your MOU, your MOE, submitting your budget worksheet, proposal narrative, all of that information will be submitted in grants.gov. But if you miss the grants, all of that information will be submitted in Just Grants. But if you miss the grants.gov deadline and you do not submit the SF424 and the SFLLL in grants.gov, you will not be able to submit a full application in the Just Grants system. The third one just reiterates what I just said. You want to submit those documents in the grants.gov system as early as possible, but no later than 24 to 48 hours before the grants.gov deadline. This is just more information. Register and or confirm existing registration at least 3 weeks prior to the application deadline to ensure that the individual who will be submitting the application has SAM, grants.gov, and Just Grants access, and is the person registered to submit on behalf of the applicant. Maintain documentation of when registration began and any issues related to registration and all communication with technical support. Failure to begin the SAM, grants.gov, or Just Grants registration process in sufficient time by the date identified in the solicitation is not an acceptable reason for late submission. So this is why it's just like a broken record. Go register on grants.gov and do your SAM registration and submit those two documents in grants.gov before the grants.gov deadline so that you are able to successfully submit a full application in the Just Grants system. Application review information. So we talked about, or you saw as we were going through the various sections. So this just kind of puts it in a chart to make it more easily seen and to stand out. Again, the proposal narrative is worth 60 points. Purpose of the proposal, what will be done, who will implement. The budget worksheet, the budget narrative is 20 points. The MOU or the MOE, that's an additional 20 points. So before I move on to peer review, I mentioned it a little while ago, but I want to emphasize that these things that are outlined and are on this chart are a must. You must submit a proposal narrative that addresses those three components. You must submit a budget worksheet and budget narrative, and you must submit an MOU or an MOE. These are called requirements. And before we move to peer review, so in the process, there is a review. Once the solicitation closes, there is a period that is allocated to what we call basic minimum requirements. And so we, OVW staff, take a look at your applications to make sure you have included all of these things that are reflected on this slide. If your application fails to include any of these things, including on your MOU or MOE, it's not signed or it's not currently dated, you will be removed from further consideration. Again, applicants, please keep in mind that this is a competitive grant process. And so you want to ensure that all your I's are dotted and all your T's are crossed to be able to meet the basic minimum requirement so that your application moves further into the process, which is peer review. So peer review is, and this is just a note, OVW will subject all eligible, complete, and timely applications to a peer review process that is based on the criteria outlined in this solicitation. OVW may use internal reviewers, external reviewers, or a combination of both. And so you don't want, when OVW staff does the basic minimum requirement look, it's a quick look, and but we are making sure each element of the application is there. What needs to be signed and dated is there. And then it will move on to what we call peer review, where we use, as I mentioned, internal reviewers or external reviewers or both. And those reviewers actually look at how your proposal responded to the criteria in each one of the sections outlined in the solicitation. So I say all that to say, the first step is to make sure, pay attention, take your time, because you do not want your application to be eliminated during the basic minimum requirement review for something like you forgot to sign, you forgot a signature, or you forgot to date it, or you forgot your budget. So just make sure that those pieces, they are fully done and you have submitted all that is needed for your application, because you want your application to be able to get to peer review. After peer review, there's another process that is done by OVW staff. It is called programmatic review. All applications that are considered for funding will be subject to a programmatic review. The programmatic review consists of assessing the application for compliance with the program scope, activities that compromise victim safety, if applicable. If you're a current grantee, your past performance weighs into this as well. Excuse me, and whether your application address one of the OVW priority areas, which we talked about early on in the presentation. Those are taken into consideration, but again, they are optional. And you don't have to address all three. You can choose one, or you can choose none, or you can choose two. It's up to you as the applicant and what it is, the type of project that you are wishing to implement. This gives you some idea of how many points can be deducted from your application during programmatic review. So if your application is found to have activities that compromise victim safety, your application could receive up to 25 points deducted. If they're out of scope and or unallowable activities, up to another 25 points can be deducted based on your past performance. So if you are a current grantee and there's a trend of no justification, we know for current grantees, there's been some, of course, with our transition to just grants, some delays and, submitting your progress reports and your financial status reports, and we understand that. But if you're a current grantee and you have just not been submitting your reports, that can be an area where your proposed continuation project could face a deduction in points. And then your application can also receive a deduction in points based on formatting and technical requirements. And I know people are, double space and all of that information is important. It is there for a reason. I wish I could say your application is the only application that we're going to look at. We are looking at many applications. And as a reviewer and for our peer reviewers, it is important that your application adheres to those formatting and technical requirements. It is important that you adhere to the page limit requirements. If we say the proposal narrative shouldn't be no more than 20 pages, if you submit 30 pages, the peer reviewers will be instructed that they will not look at pages beyond 20 pages. So we need you to be concise and adhere to the information that has been outlined in the solicitation. This talks a little bit more about past performance and just reiterates some of the things that I just spoke on. As a part of the programmatic review process, applicants with currently or recently closed OVW awards will be reviewed for past performance and risks. An applicant with considerable past performance issues may receive a deduction in points as described above, or be removed from consideration entirely, regardless of the application's peer review score. And it just directs you all to see the past performance review selection criteria outlined in the solicitation. This is just a note. So we are in the fiscal year 2022 process, and the expectation would be those of you that choose to apply for this program, you will be notified regarding funding decisions by October 1 of 2022. Federal Award Administration and information. So this is just some numbers to keep handy. I mentioned already about if you have programmatic questions, you can send an email to the SAS Culture Specific mailbox. If you have financial questions, like if there's, I mentioned that pre-award risk assessment survey, that's part of the application. If you have questions regarding that survey, you can reach out to our staff at the in the Grants Financial Management Division, and they can assist you with those more nuanced questions that have to do with the pre-award financial risk assessment question survey. Again, this slide just reiterates some of the numbers you want to keep handy for grants.gov TA support and for Just Grants technical support. If an organization has some but not all desired essay services, may we apply for full grant versus planning grant? You know, Clarice, that we will leave that up to you as the applicant. So planning grant gives you, you know, if you feel like your organization, based on the solicitation, like you can talk about the sexual assault, culturally specific sexual assault services that your organization currently provides, and you feel like your organization wants to apply for a full award for 36 months, then that's up to you as an applicant. And I'll also say, because the planning grant is also for, it could be for an organization that has traditionally been providing domestic violence services, right? So the organization has been providing culturally relevant DV services, and now they are seeing, you know, we want to be able to provide adequate SA services, but none of our policies speak to SA services. You know, our intake forms don't speak to providing services to SA survivors. Those organizations would also be eligible for a planning grant, because although it's an existing organization, they have traditionally have not provided sexual assault services, and they want to use the 24 months to be able to do the activities that I outlined, to position themselves to get appropriate technical assistance, to be able to do peer-to-peer exchange with other culturally specific organizations providing culturally specific sexual assault services. But that's a question that you will have to answer as an applicant.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Did you see the other questions in
Are
the chat?
national organizations eligible to apply? The answer would be no. Latrice says, I have applied for 2 years in a row, fiscal year 2020, fiscal year 2021, and no award selection. Do you have someone who can walk my organization through the reviews for the past 2 years? We see here positive changes in the lives of victims. We are assured of our effectiveness, but fail completely to convey successfully convey the same to you. We are humbled by failures and in earnest to learn how to communicate why our organization is worthy of this financial partnership with OVW. Please let us know how to learn from our mistakes. Well, that is an excellent question. I advise all applicants who apply for any funding stream from OVW to always follow up, right? So I mentioned earlier, the grant program specialist for this program is Tanette Gassa. And if you can reach out to her, and I know for a fact, she is very willing to share with you why you weren't selected for funding. If it was that your application was eliminated at BMR, or maybe your application made it through BMR, so you submitted everything that was supposed to be submitted, but when it got to peer review, it didn't, I'm not gonna say meet the threat, it was not selected for funding for whatever reason. Again, keep in mind that this is a very small program. We have limited funding to support projects, but I would encourage you to always follow up and ask for your peer review comments, because access to those comments about where your application may have fallen short will, is a feather in your hat to be able to improve upon your next application. And so, Latrice, I would encourage you to reach out to Tanette. Typically, it's much better to do it like much further out, because right now, your focus is probably on trying to submit the next application. So basically, when October comes, you get a letter to say you weren't selected, whatever the case may be, you need to reach out at that point to say, hey, can I get my peer review? Or can you tell me why? If it was a BMR elimination, typically the BMR, the letter says you were eliminated because of, inadequate signature or something was missing from your application. But if it was you weren't selected for funding, you definitely want to ask for your peer review comments so that that information can assist you with writing, should you choose to apply in subsequent fiscal years. Yep, I would. That is one of my keep in your back pocket, like just the reality of, we certainly can't support all projects, all organizations that apply for funding, but it's always, I like to put it, sometimes, and this is not a jab at continuation applicants, but sometimes organizations get comfortable in receiving grant funding, and they may do something that, they don't update their MOE or their MOU, and they submitted an outdated document. Well, their removal could mean a new applicant is able to continue on in the process because they did everything correctly. So my whole thing is, don't get comfortable, because the funding is always competitive. And don't be afraid to reach out when you receive that letter to say you were not selected, to ask the questions like, why wasn't I selected? Can I get my peer review comments so that you can improve your application the next go round? And again, that is not just for this program, that is for any program that you apply to from the Office on Violence Against Women. You always want to know more information about why my application was not selected. Oh, I have just a tidbit, and what I typically share when I was implementing an outreach project is that applicants typically, if I tell you, so yes, the award period, especially for a full award to do direct services, is 36 months. The budget cap is $300,000. You can ask for $300,000, but you don't have to. You can ask for what you feel like is needed in order to implement your project. Some applicants feel like, this program is relatively small, but some of the other programs that have larger appropriations, you'll have applicants that, if the program has 15 purpose areas, they're going to address all 15 purpose areas, and they're going to ask for $900,000, because as an applicant, you're thinking, I'm going to ask for everything, because if they cut me, then, there's a little cushion built in. But my advice to you is ask for what you need. An application reads much better, is much more feasible, if I feel like what you have proposed based on what you plan to implement align. We don't ask for you, this program only has one purpose area and priority areas that you can choose to address if you would like to. But ask for what you feel like you need to implement a successful project in the community in which you serve. You don't operate from the frame, I'ma just ask for more because if they cut me, then that's, I'm right where I need to be. No, ask for what you need. Don't always ask for more. So that's just a tidbit of information when it comes to applying for grant funding with OVW.
Can I jump in with a question, Michelle?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure, so the step of submitting the SF424 and the SFLLL in grants.gov, I could do that like right now, right? If I have an account, there's no, like, I don't have to wait until a certain time.
You can do that right now, and we actually encourage you to do that.
Okay, great.
The sooner you can do that, the better. And for those, it sounds like you are already familiar, you've already registered in SAM and grants.gov, you can go in and submit but for those that are not familiar and may not have, an account in grants.gov and in the SAM system, you want to do that now because you don't want to be faced with, technical problems down the line that's going to impact you being able to submit your full application in Just Grants. So just go now, do your registration. When that's complete, submit the 2 documents. It doesn't hurt if you submit the 2 documents in grants.gov and then you decide, oh, I don't want to apply, that's fine. But at least you got it done. You don't want to not do it and then decide to apply, but by the time you decide to do it, it's too late. You can't get those documents into grants.gov because you haven't done the registration in a timely fashion, which means you won't be able to submit a full application in Just Grants.
Thanks. A second question there is, I guess I don't know what the SF424 and SFLLL are, and I'm sorry if you described them or mentioned them, but what's the nature of those forms? Like what kind of information?
Yeah, they ask the SLL, that's the lobbying disclosure, like you won't participate in lobbying. It's very, very, direct to the point, forms. The SF424 tells us a little bit about your organization, but it's just a form that you fill out. It just gives some preliminary information about your organization.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hi again. Is there a OVW technical and training service provider for this grant, a specific organization?
Yeah, so for this program, the TA provider is the Sisters of Color, it's CSA, Sisters of Color Ending Sexual Assault.
Okay, that's what I thought you said. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. We have about less than maybe like 29 minutes allocated for this call, but I'm kind of like a college professor. I don't want to keep you if you don't want to be kept. But if you have questions, please feel free to ask them. I know we all have busy schedules and many of you on the call are direct services providers, so you have clients that you need to see, and so we want to be mindful of the time. Thank you so much. I appreciate the feedback. All right, DMR, I think I'm up for the close. I'm gonna just again, if you have, we've given you, and you'll see the information repeated ad nauseum in the solicitation, just as far as who to contact if you have challenges, technical support with Just Grants or grants.gov, but also if you have programmatic questions that you would like clarification on or that you think of after this call, you can always send an email to the culturally specific mailbox, ovw.sam sas.cultural@usdoj.gov.